He let me stay when no one else would. The house was quiet. Too quiet, maybe. Some nights felt heavier than others, but I never asked. And then one morning, he was just gone. No message. No warning. Only a note on the table and a door left half open. After I lost my job, I had two options: sleep in my car or text Dan. I hadn't seen him in almost a year. Not because we fell out or anything, just life. Different schedules. Different cities. But we were tight back in college. The kind of friends who didn't talk for 6 months and picked up like it was yesterday. So I texted him, "Hey, things are rough. Any chance you've got space?" He replied 10 minutes later, "Yeah. Come through. No questions. No conditions." That's just how Dan was. I packed what I could into 2 bags and drove out the next morning. He lived in the old house his parents left behind. Edge of a small town, quiet street, yard overgrown like no one cared. Inside, it was clean enough. Sparse. Like he didn't bother making it more than functional. He opened the door in a plain hoodie and said, "Didn't expect to see you like this." "Didn't expect to be like this," I said. He just nodded. No judgment. The first few days were easy. I helped clean up, made food when I could, applied to jobs during the day. He worked from home, freelance coding or something equally quiet, and mostly kept to himself. We played cards some nights. Talked about old stories. It felt normal. It wasn't glamorous, but it was solid. He never brought up money. Never set a deadline. Just let me exist there without pressure. He even gave me his old room and took the smaller one down the hall. Said he liked it colder anyway. Looking back, I think that was the first sign. He always gave more space than people deserved. And maybe I should have asked why. Maybe I should have noticed the silence he lived in. But I didn't. I just unpacked, plugged in my laptop, and thought I'd landed safely. Thought I was lucky. Turns out, luck's just another name for what you haven't ruined yet. I met Ellie at the laundromat 2 blocks from Dan's place. She was standing at a broken change machine, smacking the side with her palm like she was negotiating with it. Faded hoodie, chipped black nail polish, earbuds in, completely unaware of how visible she was being. I offered her quarters. She made a joke I didn't expect. We talked. She was smart, not in that showy way, but the kind where you realized too late you were already 2 steps behind in the conversation. She asked questions like she already knew the answers. We exchanged numbers. I told myself it was harmless. We met again. Coffee. Then drinks. Then more. About a week in, I told her I was staying with a friend. She asked who. I told her, Dan. She went quiet for just a beat too long. You mean Dan Mason? Yeah. You know him? She nodded, looking off like she'd just remembered something she hadn't planned to. We used to date, she said finally. Oh. Long time ago. Like, a year or more. It wasn't dramatic. Is that weird? She looked at me and smiled. Only if we make it weird. And that was that. Except it wasn't. Because every time we saw each other after that, I felt it. Something just beneath the surface. Like there were pieces I hadn't been given. I didn't tell Dan. I justified it as not important. Said we weren't serious yet. That I'd tell him if it turned into something real. But it already had. Ellie started staying over more. Not at Dan's place, at hers. I'd disappear for a night or 2. Dan never asked where I was. Never commented. Just nodded when I came back, even when I looked like hell. One night I asked him, casually, "You ever talk to Ellie anymore?" He was sitting on the couch, typing something. Without looking up, he said, "No. Just that. Not bitter. Not curious. Just, no." And that should have told me something. Because Dan wasn't the type to pretend. If he didn't care, he wouldn't answer. But if he did, he'd lie like it wasn't even worth the truth. By the 3rd month, I was splitting time between Dan's place and Ellie's without ever officially saying I'd moved out. I still kept my stuff in his spare room, the clothes, the laptop, the extra charger I always forgot. But more and more, I was just passing through. Dan never said a word. Never asked when I'd be back. Never asked where I was going. He just let it happen, like everything else in his life, quietly, without confrontation. One night, Ellie asked me if I felt bad. I was lying on her floor, head propped up on a rolled-up hoodie. She was sitting by the window, lighting a cigarette she didn't finish. For what? I asked. Staying at his place while sleeping with me. The room got quieter. I said, "It's not like we're doing anything wrong. You guys broke up a long time ago. Still, she said. It's bold. He doesn't care. She looked at me like she knew something I didn't. You sure about that? I said I was. But I wasn't. Not really. Because it wasn't just what Dan didn't say, it was what he didn't do. He stopped watching the shows we used to put on during late nights. Stopped leaving out coffee mugs for two. Stopped asking how the job hunt was going. The place felt colder. Like he was already packing without boxes. Then there was the note. One night I came back to grab some things, clean clothes, charger, checked the mail, and found a yellow sticky note on my bedroom door. You left the window unlocked. Don't make a habit of it. No name. No comment. Just that. Dan never left notes. Never needed to. I checked the window. It was closed. Locked. Secure. Which meant either he was wrong, or he was watching. Testing. Measuring how far I'd let things slide. And I did what I always did when I felt guilty. I ignored it. Told myself he was just being careful. Told myself he didn't mind. But part of me already knew. I wasn't a guest anymore. I was just someone passing through a house that no longer wanted me in it. It was a Thursday when Dan disappeared. I came home late. Not unusual. I'd been at Ellie's, pretending we weren't avoiding the subject of him, pretending we weren't tethered to something neither of us wanted to fully admit. When I walked in, the house felt too quiet. Lights off. No music. No laptop hum from Dan's room. His car was gone, but that wasn't strange. He took off sometimes, worked from cafes, drove out to hike, think, whatever. What was strange was the envelope on the kitchen table. My name. No stamp. No return address. I opened it. Inside, a single sheet of paper. Handwritten. Don't look for me. Everything you needed, you already took. No signature. His room was empty. Not just messy, empty. Clothes gone. Laptop gone. Drawers open, cleared out. The closet door hung half open like it had nothing left to protect. His bed was stripped. The key I'd used since I got there was sitting on top of the dresser. For the first few hours, I thought maybe it was a joke. Or a dramatic way to get space. I texted. Called. No answer. By midnight, I called Ellie. She picked up on the second ring. He's gone, I said. She didn't ask who I meant. She just said, how much did he take? What? Stuff. Money. Did he clean you out? No. He left a note. A pause. What did it say? I read it to her. She was quiet for a while. Then, he knew. I think he always did. Yeah. I sat down in the chair he always used when we played cards. It still had the small tear in the cushion. A piece of his hoodie string was caught in the armrest. He's not coming back, I said. No. That was the last thing she said before hanging up. No offer to come over. No apology. No plan. Just silence. And me, sitting in a house that didn't belong to me, in a chair that wasn't mine, realizing that everything I'd convinced myself was harmless had finally come due. The next morning, I tried again. I called him. Straight to voicemail. I texted. Dan, I'm sorry. Can we talk? No reply. I checked with a mutual friend, Josh. Asked if he'd heard anything. Josh said he hadn't seen Dan in months. I told him about the note. About the sudden disappearance. Josh paused. Then said, he did something like this once. After his dad passed. Just vanished for a few weeks. Turned up like nothing happened. I wanted to believe that was all this was. But this didn't feel like grief. This felt like erasure. I drove to a few places Dan used to go, that diner off 7th, the old bookstore downtown, the hiking trail he liked. Nothing. No car. No trace. No one remembered seeing him recently. At one point I even drove to his parents' old property out by the lake, just in case. The gate was chained. Cabin locked up. No footprints, no tire marks. Just dust. I slept in his house that night, alone. Cold. No food in the fridge, no lights left on. It felt like walking through someone else's absence. Ellie texted me the next afternoon. You okay? I didn't answer. I didn't know how to answer. Because the truth was, I wasn't. And not in the way people say when they're hurting, but in the way you are when something snapped inside and you're not sure if it was yours or someone else's. That weekend, the water got shut off. Then the power. I checked the lease paperwork. It wasn't in Dan's name. It was still in his dad's. No rent paid in 2 months. Past due notices piled up behind the door I hadn't opened since January. That's when it hit me. He hadn't just left me the house. He'd left me the fallout. And I had no claim to any of it. So I packed a bag, left what I couldn't carry, dropped his key on the kitchen table where he'd left mine, locked the door behind me, not for him, but for the memory of him. Then I bought a bus ticket back to the only place I had left, the town I swore I'd never return to. My old room was exactly how I left it, same peeling posters, same dent in the wall from where I kicked it senior year. The mattress felt thinner. Or maybe I was heavier. My mom didn't ask too many questions when I showed up. "Dan kick you out?" she said, half joking. I forced a smile. Something like that. She didn't push. Just told me to put the sheets in the wash and that dinner was at 7. I didn't have the energy to tell her the truth. That Dan didn't kick me out. He vanished. Left me to sit with the consequences of something I pretended wasn't real until it gutted both of us. The next few days passed in that half-alive way. I checked job boards. Slept late. Ate out of habit. I didn't hear from Ellie. At first, I kept checking my phone like maybe she'd text again. Then I started hoping she wouldn't. On the 4th night, I opened an old photo album I'd left behind years ago. College pictures. Dan and I in front of that busted Toyota we tried to fix for a month. Beer pong tournaments. Halloween in matching terrible costumes. And then one photo that hit me harder than the rest. Dan, me, and Ellie, back when she was just the girl Dan brought to a cookout. She had her arm around his waist. He had this soft, unguarded smile. I remembered taking that picture. He asked me afterward if I thought she was too much for him. I told him no. That he needed someone who could pull him out of his own head. Funny how advice ages. I stayed up late that night, trying to write something to him. Some kind of apology. A message I'd send if he ever turned his phone back on. I got as far as, "I never meant for this to happen." Then stopped, because even if I didn't mean it, I let it happen. And we both knew that. It arrived on a Thursday. No return address. No postmark. Just a plain white envelope slipped through the mail slot sometime after lunch. My mom handed it to me without comment. "Someone stopped by." Nope. Must have just missed them. The handwriting on the front was familiar. Clean. Sharp. Deliberate. Inside was a photo. The three of us. Dan, Ellie, and me. Taken maybe 2 years ago. We were sitting on the porch at his old place, holding cheap beers, laughing. He had his arm around her. I was leaning forward, mid-joke. It looked like a good memory. Until I flipped it over. One line, written in the same clean handwriting. Everything I didn't say was already in the picture. No signature. No message. Just that. I stared at it for a long time. Thought about what Dan meant. How he used to say the quietest moments were the ones where you learned the most about people. How he watched, not because he was shy, but because he was paying attention. He'd seen it. All of it. The nights I left without explanation. The way I changed when I talked about Ellie. The cracks in the friendship we pretended were just distance. He never confronted me. He just faded. And then left a photograph to do what he wouldn't. Say out loud what I never had the guts to admit. That I'd betrayed him. Not just with Ellie. But with silence. With selfishness. With the assumption that he'd always just be there. I didn't know what to do with the photo. So I didn't frame it. Didn't burn it. I just put it in the top drawer of the desk in my old room, the one I swore I'd never open again. And I left it there. Right where it belongs. I kept the photo. Told myself I'd throw it out, or send it back, or maybe burn it just to feel like I was doing something final. But I didn't. It stayed in that drawer, under some old receipts and a notebook with 3 blank pages left. The kind of drawer you open when you're looking for something else and immediately regret finding what you weren't ready for. Weeks passed. I didn't hear from Dan. Not a text. Not an email. Not a trace. But somehow, he was still everywhere. In the way I'd hesitate before answering the phone. In the silence between conversations with people who didn't know. In every sentence I rewrote in my head but never sent. I started working again. Warehouse job. Nothing impressive, but stable. Shift work. Fewer people asking questions. Fewer people who remembered me as the guy who used to crash on someone else's couch like it was permanent. I didn't talk about Dan. Or Ellie. Or anything that happened in those few months. But some nights, late, after a double shift, sitting in a car that barely ran, I'd find myself wondering what Dan expected me to do next. Not as punishment. But as the natural consequence of failing someone like him, I think part of me expected him to come back, to confront me, to yell, to crack a joke and pretend we could glue something together. But he never did. That was his version of a final word. No word at all. And maybe that's what stings the most. You lose a friend loud, you get closure. You lose one quiet, you just echo. And the echo lives in you longer than the noise ever would. So now I live with it. A house I don't have. A friend I can't text. A photo I don't frame. And a single sentence I can't stop reading in my head, over and over, like it's still on that kitchen table. Everything you needed, you already took. He was right. I did. And then I took one step too far. And now I know what it costs. When someone disappears. And chooses to stay gone.